Hello Internet, it's Seth Skorkowski, and today we're going to discuss running a heist adventure for your tabletop role-playing game. These are adventures where the heroes are tasked with recovering some item from a secure location without getting caught, or at least the hope of not getting caught. I am a huge fan of heist stories. I love running heist games, and also as a quick shameless plug here, I also write sword and sorcery thief adventures. My Tales of the Black Raven series is 21 stories, several of them heists, which you can read or listen to, with my wonderful audiobook narrator, R.C. Bray. Among the goals of a good heist is to do the job with as little to no combat as possible, which is one of the key differences between a heist and a raid. Or I guess we should go ahead and call this a stealth heist versus an assault heist. Now, it doesn't matter which game system you're running for this, so if you're wanting to do this with Dungeons & Dragons or Star Wars or whatever else, the same general pieces and steps apply. But GMs, you still are going to have to tailor the heist for whatever system and what particular group it is you're planning on running it with. And of course, there are always going to be exceptions, so if you come up with some idea that doesn't quite follow this, that's perfectly fine. There are a million ways to do a heist, and if you find one that you like and it works and doesn't quite follow what we're going to be talking about today, cool. But this is what has worked for me, so hopefully there's something here that can be useful for you. There are 3 ingredients that make a heist story, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and list them here, then we're going to break them down further. First is the artifact. This is the item that the characters are trying to get. Second is the fortress. This is the place the item is stored and protected. Third is the dragon. This is the major threat that the heroes cannot easily fight or escape from if it's roused, i.e. don't wake the dragon. Let's look at the artifact, the prize of the heist. The artifact can be just about anything. Treasure, a book, computer file, Death Star plans. It can be a person, such as this mission is an abduction, or this could be a rescue operation. While heists are usually reserved for thief-type adventures, rescues can definitely fall into the realm of a good heist adventure. Why the player characters want the artifact is completely up to you. Maybe it's for profit, like they're planning on selling it or something, or maybe this is just a necessary piece to a larger campaign. Maybe the heroes are being blackmailed and being forced into this heist against their will, but the focus of the heist is still centered around getting the artifact. Oddly enough, even though it is the focus, the artifact is going to be the easiest part for game masters to do. This is just the motivating MacGuffin, but most likely the thing that the game master spends the least time preparing for. Unlike the fortress, which is the area the game master is probably going to be spending the most time preparing. The fortress holds the artifact. Now, this can be an actual fortress, or it could be a museum, a skyscraper, a train, a mansion, a government building, a warehouse, whatever you want. The more secure, the better. The heroes must either get inside the fortress to get the artifact, or create a reason for the artifact to leave, that way the heroes can get it once it leaves the fortress. GMs must prepare the fortress and have some details about it ready before the game begins. It should feel like a real place to the players, and it might be of design to solely protect the artifact, or it might just be a secure location that the artifact just happens to be inside of as well. But make the security around the fortress fit and feel appropriate for whatever it is. Now, one thing with the fortress is that it must be populated. This could be office staff, tourists, guards, automaton sentries, or whatever else it is that you like. These people are the obstacles and the witnesses that the players must overcome or avoid. This population could also just be a security system that's tied to an alarm. While our fortress population might pose their own threat, i.e. security guards might have guns and swords or whatnot, the big threat that they pose is that they can wake the dragon. That lone guard or noisy neighbor or security camera might not be that threatening in and of itself, but the unstoppable monster that they can summon if the heroes don't avoid or neutralize them quietly and quickly, that is the real threat. Game masters are going to need to consider the specific game that they're playing and what their groups and abilities and powers are when designing this fortress. Like I mentioned in my How to Run a Mystery video, game masters don't want their game destroyed in seconds because they forgot to take into account some spell or technology that the player characters have at their disposal. If the player characters can teleport, it might quickly solve the heist problem if one of them just teleports in there, grabs the item, and teleports back and is all like, hey, what now? Or if they need that computer file, why can't they just hack and get that from the outside? You need to answer all these questions before the heist begins. For For teleportation, depending on the specifics of whatever game it is that you're playing, maybe the artifact is somehow shielded from it, like the room is plated in lead or gold, and as everybody knows, you can't use teleportation or telekinetics through those barriers. Or maybe there's just some sort of magic dampener around wherever the artifact is, or because they cannot see the room that the artifact is in, they can't just teleport in there because you can't teleport somewhere that you can't see. Whatever else it is that fits your game, just find a reason why their powers and abilities are not going to be able to help them just solve this heist in mere minutes. If it's a computer file, you of course can do the old lone terminal cut off from the network gag. Maybe they have to get the physical drive that it's on, and you can't hack getting the physical drive. Whatever the problem, just be sure that you have a plausible reason why the player characters can't just bypass this heist with the ability. Don't just tell them it's not going to work. You need to have a reason for them. That way it sounds believable and doesn't just make it sound like you're being a jerk that's trying to prevent them from doing all the powers that they got that character to do. Build the fortress from the point of view of the person protecting the artifact. How would they do this considering whatever means they have available to them? And while you might come up with some great ideas about how the player characters might go about, doing this heist as you're designing the fortress, but do not plan the heist for them. Don't make it to where there's only one way to do this, or it looks like there's a very overly obvious way of doing it. Your job is to build the fortress. Their job is to get in and get out with the artifact, and 9 times out of 10, their plan is going to involve some sort of crazy idea that you never imagined. So don't try to design the heist plan as you're doing it as to how they're going to get the artifact. Just build the place and leave the planning up to the players. It's one thing to notice or design a few flaws in the fortress's security as you're building it all together, but just be fair and be honest. If there is a weakness in the fortress, why has the protector not sealed it? Maybe they haven't noticed that weakness yet. Maybe this weakness is new due to some sort of outside variable, and that's why the heist has to happen now, is because now there's a new weakness that wasn't there before. But Game Masters, and I cannot stress this one enough, do not design the fortress where there's only one way of solving it. The best fortresses have many layers of protection, such as the outer layer is guards, and the next layer is that it's going to be housed 12 stories up, and then you've got vault doors, then you've got some sort of amazing security system, and then you've got an impressive safe itself. So that way the players have to bypass or defeat multiple types of obstacles, hopefully using a variety of players to do this. You have to do it with teamwork and a wide variety of skills. Now for the dragon. The dragon is the promised threat if they fail. It is something so scary that the player characters know that they can't easily defeat or escape from this if it's awakened. The dragon should be intimidating. This could be the police, the military, an actual dragon, an angry god, just something formidable. Maybe the dragon is just the knowledge about the heist itself, such as the protector cannot know that the item was taken or had a switcheroo done on it, and if they find out too early, then the whole reason for the heist has been spoiled. Or maybe the dragon is the client or the buyer of the artifact. The client demands that nobody know about this heist, and if the PCs get spotted, the boss that gave them the job ends up becoming the true threat. Or if news about the heist gets out, then all of the ships or the portals that are leaving this city or island or nation or world that they're on get sealed off, and it's going to trap the player characters here. So the reason they can't wake the dragon is they don't want to ever get trapped wherever it is that they are. The key to a dragon is that it is scary and best avoided. If the player characters do not fear the dragon, then they might turn your stealth heist adventure into an assault heist and just go in there with guns blazing. And no knocking assault heists, those are a blast in their own way. I love running them and I love playing them. But if you're wanting your game to be stealth and cleverness and try to avoid it being a kill house bloodbath, the threat of the dragon is the key. Okay, so those are the 3 parts that you have to design before the game starts. Now to go into the 3 phases that happen during the game itself. First is the setup. This is where the characters get the job. Maybe they're hired by a shady employer, maybe they figured out that the artifact is here and they need it for a larger campaign and this just happens to be housed in the fortress. That part is completely up to you. The important part is this is where the players are going to get the initial information as far as the artifact's location, the fortress, and the dragon. Also, if there's some sort of in-character time limit going on, such as we have 5 days to get this artifact before it ships out, then we're never finding it again. Or in 1 week, the artifact is going to be used to summon the dark god unless we stop it. You should go ahead and mention that time limit here. The setup might include different steps such as gathering the party, like where they're meeting each other for the first time, or maybe bringing the party back together from a previous job. Next comes information gathering. This is where the player characters stake out the place. Maybe they befriend or blackmail a guard for information or to steal his passkey. Maybe they're going to go and research the building's plans in order to find a weakness in it. This part can take quite a while. It could be an entire session if you want it to be. Or if you're just wanting the game, to get quickly straight to the heist job itself, maybe you could have the employer provide them with all this stakeout information and say, like, here's all the information about it. You build your plan off of this. Or you could kind of do a little bit of information. That way the PCs can look at it and they can go, okay, out of all these different things, we want to research these two areas more directly because we know a little bit of information about them and we think that's how we're going to approach it. Then you might have the equipment shopping spree. This is where the characters pick up or create all those neat gadgets, disguises, weapons, potions, tools, spell scrolls, or whatever else it is that they think they're going to need to do this job. A lot of players really do get into this part and it is a lot of fun, but be warned, I have watched players get so into the part where they're pouring through equipment and gear guides that it starts distracting them from the game itself. This is where time limits can help you out. If the player characters have some sort of ticking clock going on, they might not have time to go out and buy all the cool things that they want, either because there's no time to shop for it or because the time it would take for them to order it or to have it created, the job has to be done before that date. So that way it's a good way of limiting it without just telling them, no, you can't do it. Somewhere in all this, they're also going to begin the plan. This part is key. The players are going to sit around, probably around some map that you gave them, maybe with some different handouts of security pictures, and they're going to begin making the strategy as far as how they're going to get this artifact. I personally love this part, but it does have a few hurdles that you need to look out for. Your players are going to be sitting there bouncing ideas, creating strategy, and it's a lot of fun. The first problem, though, is that some players are going to spend too much time planning to the point that the game begins losing steam. This is where some players might become a little too indecisive, basically discussing the plan to death because they're afraid to act, spending the entire session talking about the game rather than playing the game. So game masters, you might want to consider putting a time limit here, not for the characters, but for the players. However, this part can be tricky and does require some judgment on your part in order to call how long that time limit should be. You don't want to give them too little time and make the players feel like you're crippling them. And if the players are going to be spending their planning phase, gathering intel, maybe role-playing out as they meet people or they break into places to steal, key cards and that sort of thing, and they're actively playing the game, then just let them play. Don't make that subject to the time limit as well. Just let them play the game if they're actually actively playing it, but the sitting around discussing it, that's where you're probably going to want to put some sort of time limit on it. There does come a point where the players need to stop talking about playing and go ahead and play, but how long that is completely depends on your players and the nature of the heist itself. So maybe start with an hour and just kind of see how that works from there. At the end of that hour, if they're all like, no, we need more time, and you can look at it and go, yeah, you guys probably need a little bit more time. You can, bump 10 or 15 more minutes to let them finish planning it out. But if you just kind of let it as a general blank check, they can take as much time as they want. If you have that player that's just a little too indecisive and they're just trying to stall, putting themselves in fear of waking the dragon, they're going to take all the time in the world to the point that the game is just no longer fun for anybody. Next, during the planning phase, it's possible that your players might find a hole in your fortress, a legitimate hole that you missed and didn't intend to be there. So, what do? Again, that depends. Some game masters see it as like, well, it was my mistake, so the players can fully exploit that to the best of their abilities. But the way I see it is just because you as the game master made a glaring error in your fortress, that shouldn't make it something that makes the game just too easy for the players to solve. Because once the game is done, if the game was too easy for them, they are going to be disappointed. So it's one of those things you have to figure out what is the right level of, challenging that in order to keep the game fun. And if it's not challenging enough, then they're going to be disappointed in it. So sometimes if you find a hole, that might take away all the challenge. So this is where you just need to be honest with yourself and ask the question, would the protector have left that glaring hole there? Maybe they would have, maybe they wouldn't have. If they wouldn't have, then you should plug the hole. Maybe not as tightly as you would have done it if you had thought about this hole before the game began, but don't leave it completely open and available to exploit and end up sabotaging your own game. But you do have to be honest with yourself. Remember, the Protector might have had months or years or even centuries of building this fortress's defenses. They are the expert, you're not. You're a game master. But maybe, just maybe, they did miss something that the player characters can exploit. I'm inclined to give them some sort of bonus if they find the hole. I'm not going to hand them a full success to the adventure because of my mistake, but I might make it where that hole is actually something that they can exploit, just not fully exploit. Also, don't just sit there while the player characters and players are sitting there, they're making their plans, and you just start blocking every single idea as they have it, because that's where it starts becoming a player versus game master mindset, where you're basically, cutting off any single idea they have because you're trying to railroad them into doing a certain way of doing it. That's not cool. So go ahead, just build the place, let them build it from there. In case of emergency, you might have to adapt the place a little bit, but don't just start blocking every single cool idea that isn't the way you want them to do it. One of my buddies does this thing whenever he's running a heist game where he just leaves the room. He announces, hey everybody, I'll be back in an hour, get your planning, and then we're going to start once I get back. And that way he cannot, as the game master, anticipate what the player's moves are going to be. He can be honest and not accidentally metagame, and also he can experience that full surprise that the bad guys will feel once the PCs, do whatever crazy idea it is that they have. The other reason that he does it is that way the players can't read his face while they're doing the planning because Matt, brother, you got a really bad poker face. Now that works for him. Personally, I like being in the room during the planning phase, if nothing else just because I get asked a lot of questions as far as, different rule mechanics or rulings like that, so I want to be available for them. That way I can answer any questions and they can get back to planning instead of waiting for me to get back to give them some sort of rules clearance. Eventually the planning is going to end and we get to move on to the next phase, the job itself. Okay, so after all the planning, surveillance, gearing up, it is finally showtime. Your players are going to enact their most likely crazy plan, coming up the fortress sideways in some manner that you as the GM could have never predicted them to do. Maybe it's a great plan, maybe it's not. You're probably going to have to be improvising the hell out of this either way, because no matter how much pre-work you did, you're still going to have to improvise it once the game begins. That's just a rule of being a game master, and hopefully everyone in the room is having an absolute blast doing this heist. Now it's time for the kink. The kink is some variable that happens that the players are not expecting, some sort of new obstacle that runs the risk of shattering their brilliant plan and waking the dragon. Maybe that guard that they watched and they timed all his patrol patterns, maybe he called in sick that day and now it's a new guard that's got a different patrol pattern and they have to adapt to that. Or maybe the fact they're planning on breaking into this office building at night when no one's there, that one guy shows up and he starts working late. Now the player characters have to avoid this guy because he might wake the dragon if he spots them. Maybe the neighbor's dog starts barking. Maybe a dump truck pulled into the alley where their getaway car is stashed, and now the PCs have to either get a new getaway car, or they're going to have to drive out of this alleyway backwards at high speed as they're getting chased by security guards. Any good heist movie has a kink. They should give us some sort of spike of fear and require improvisation from the players and hopefully a few dice rolls in order for them to overcome this. But the kink should never be, your whole plan just fails. So game masters, make the kink an obstacle that the player characters can overcome, but never ever make it some sort of automatic failure, because that's just going to piss your players off, and it should just piss your players off. Let me give you a quick story of a great kink that I encountered, this time as a player, and we were playing some Cyberpunk 2020. The short version is that we were trying to get to the middle floor of this giant high-rise and extract a scientist and all of his research information. We managed to get into the building under this elaborate disguise of being optic fiber installers, running cable up and down the building. It was a brilliant plan and it was working beautifully. One of the other players and I were up on the roof. We were doing this job. We were actually installing cable because that was our ruse, but we were also hacking into the elevator's controls so we could access the scientist's floor. And we were doing this while there was a guard standing up on the roof who's actually kind of casually looking over our shoulders, so we're trying to do this while under observation, and we were making the rolls and it was going great. But right as you guys finish hot wiring that elevator, that guard on the roof walks up to you and he's all like, "Hey, my boss has some questions and he needs to ask you, so I'm supposed to take you down to his office right now, so you need to follow me." The other player and I just looked at each other, positive that we'd been made. There's a word in an old Solo of Fortune book where when a job goes pear-shaped, the word is bombshell. So I asked my buddy, "Bombshell? Bombshell. I'm going to go ahead and tap on my comm to the rest of the group. Bombshell." Well, it's great while it lasted, but now let's kill every mother
bunker in this place.
And we did. It was a legendary firefight as we shot our way through the building, getting the scientists and getting down to the rescue car before the police could arrive. I'm also pretty sure that the only reason we even lived through that entire encounter because the game master was being kind to us. Anyway, after the game, I asked the GM how it was that we got caught, where it was we went wrong, and he said, "You didn't." He then explained that the security chief just had some questions about why we needed to access some of the floors that we were accessing, which we already had pre-planned lies for. Had the security guard just asked us those questions while we were all on the roof, it would have been fine because we had some pre-planned answers. But because it came with this kind of added caveat of you need to come to the security guard's office right now to answer these questions, we panicked and we completely outed ourselves. That to me is a perfect kink. We were prepared for the question, but because the circumstances weren't what we weren't ready for, we ended up screwing ourselves and it was not the game master screwing us over. Next comes the escape. Depending on how the job goes, the escape can either be a thrilling, nail-biting chase or a smooth and casual, like a badass professional just pull off the perfect job, casually steps into their car and drives away. Some game masters might make the escape part be the big focus of the adventure, such as actually stealing the artifact is pretty easy to do. It's getting away with stealing it where they want to have the whole game be some sort of kind of elaborate cat and mouse chase scene all over the city or all over this planet or wherever the game is set. Once they're away, you may or may not have a third phase, the trade-off. This is where the player characters are going to be handing over the goods to their employer or to a fence and getting paid. This also might include the employer double-crossing them. It's also possible that the employer has made some sort of secret deal with one of the player characters, one of the non-player characters to kind of help them in this double-cross. Or it could just be perfect and the employer is like, hey, good job, I'm going to hire you guys again in the future. Well, that's it for heist games. Hopefully some of you out there found this helpful and got some ideas stirring about how it is you might be able to do a heist adventure on your own.
You ain't gonna tell them about the van?
Nah, it really doesn't fit here, and also it's more of a personal anecdote than anything else.
So, it's your channel. It's supposed to be personal. Besides, when else are you gonna be able to tell this little bit?
Okay, fine. As I mentioned before in other videos, for vehicle miniatures, we just use toy cars for that, and while I've amassed a nice little collection of modern and sci-fi and 1920s cars, the white cargo van has a very special place for us. Because a work van is so common, I had a character who always used them for jobs. And they were all souped up inside, they had armor plating and beefed up engines, and they even had some quick change logos on the side, that way they could, kind of quickly mask which van it was if they were in traffic. But this joke about an elite team of badass cyberpunk thieves and mercenaries has become so synonymous with the white cargo van that even today, whenever we're driving down the highway and we see a van driving along kind of recklessly, it might have a little bit of bumper damage. Even today, my wife and I will joke that that's not contractors trying to get to a job, that's a bunch of cyberpunkers fleeing from a heist. We're talking about you, little guy. Vroom, vroom. And while I mentioned my Black Raven stuff earlier in this video, there's also my story, The Mist of Lichthofen, which I read many years ago, which is another fantasy/horror heist adventure, and that is on YouTube. So if you're in the mood for a fantasy heist story, despite the fact that it's read by somebody who's clearly not a trained audio narrator, go ahead, check it out, stuck a link at the end.
Hi, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of our stuff, such as game reviews and how-tos, just hit that subscribe button. Till next time, gamers, you have a great day.